Welcome to Into the Metaverse, a new episode. I have a really fascinating guest today, kind of, coming to the other side of the table, and you'll understand in a minute why I'm saying it. It's Stephanie Hirschmiller. I'm going to let Stephanie introduce herself, but before we get going on that, I just want to set the stage of what we're going to talk about today, which I'm really excited about. And it's based on a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past couple of years at Super Social, things I'm passionate about, and also things that Stephanie wrote about quite extensively. And we're going to really unpack and have a really fun, open conversation about why the proliferation of 3D avatars that are now starting to roam the internet, especially on 3D platforms like Roblox and Fortnite and others, why that phenomena plays such a key role in the way the beauty industry, fashion industries, anything related to lifestyle and expression is really taking a big step forward on those domains, and why it all relates to the bigger picture of what happens when the metaverse is here. And we'll talk about what that even mean. But before all of that, Stephanie, so fun to have you on the show. Please tell us, who you are, what have you been busy with over the past few years, and we'll get going.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Hirschmiller. Yon is one of the very few people who actually pronounces it right, so well done him. I come from quite a different background. My actual background is first of all in TV with the BBC, and then in editorial media and journalism. I'm now based in Paris. I used to live in London, where I work for Vogue UK, I work for The Telegraph, I work for Women's Wear Daily. I relocated to Paris with Women's Wear Daily and their sister publication Footwear News in 2016. And I was relaunching their Paris office basically. But I left in about 4 or 5 years later because I was getting much more interested in the commercial side of the industry. And so I started consulting, and now basically I help luxury brands and creative studios and tech partners. I matchmake brands with innovation platforms. I help with introductions and partnerships. I help with strategic positioning, with communications. I help brands and platforms talk to different audiences, whether you're talking to investors, consumers, brands. It's also what matters to these different audiences, what they find interesting. And then as I mentioned, on the consultancy side as well, I've also, along with my business partner Hollywood, we have a platform called Future Face, and basically we lay on in real life events for decision makers in the beauty industry, where we have panels. Our last, we had an AI panel and an engagement 360 panel. But what makes them really different is we work with technology partners, and we get each of these partners to lay on a mini masterclass where they actually get to workshop our guests from the beauty brand, and it's just a really interactive way of learning. I feel like people take in much more when they're in an active listening position rather than just sort of sat on their bottoms with someone talking at you. So that is me. As you can see, I work very much at the intersection of luxury fashion and beauty and innovation. So that's why I think I'm here.
And Stephanie, thank you so much for the introduction. You've had over the past few years, you've had a front row seat primarily, but not only because a lot of the great writing you're doing as contributor writing to, folks like Forbes and others, and really focusing on, beauty and fashion and lifestyle. And it's been happening in a time, especially the last 3 years, where beauty brands have been some of the earliest adopters of quote unquote virtual world platforms, NFT, Web3. I mean, this whole kind of variety of hype and buzzword that have emerged over the last few years, but really fundamentally, they're all connected in this one big theme, which is the future of the internet. And that's how I got to know you and got to know your work, writing about so many wonderful things that brands have been doing. And this is now after 100 episodes that I have published on Into the Metaverse podcast, which is a wonderful milestone. And I feel like we're still just scratching the surface of what's possible in this domain. One of the things that is really fundamentally clear is that there is a human behavior shift where a whole new generation anyone below age 25 doesn't really need to be educated or explain what is the metaverse, right? For them, the metaverse is here, and virtual world is kind of the next iteration of how they experience, engage with, and control their presence online, happening in 3D platforms powered by an identity that is really manifested through a 3D avatar. And in a way, one of the things that I'm kind of posing as a thought provoking idea, what if the metaverse is not a thing? It's not a place. It's not even a technology. What if the metaverse is actually a point in time where people are going to care about their virtual identity and invest in more than they do in their physical identity? And I want to do an exercise where let's imagine that that's really what is the definition of the metaverse, and that's what will happen where people actually care as much and maybe more about their virtual identity than they do about their physical one. What do you think that would mean for beauty brands who primarily sell physical products, but are also still very much dominating what we can think of as, legacy internet platform? What is that behavior shift and people using their 3D avatars for connection, expression, and ultimately guiding who they want to be in the real world? What do you think that could mean for beauty brands?
I mean, as you said, I mean, there've been a lot of surveys recently, especially for Gen Z, especially for Generation Alpha as well, saying that probably a good percentage of them do care more about their virtual identity rather than their physical identity. And it's certainly a statistic, and it's certainly something that brands need to be mindful of. But the thing is, on the other hand, you also need to be mindful that where brands currently make their money is IRL products. That is, the main proportion of their sales right now. I mean, even for example, with your games on that you've created with Super Social. I mean, I know even Roblox now is trialing IRL commerce via the social platform. And that's, I mean, so whereas we can already buy so many, whether it's virtual fashion, whether it's virtual makeup looks, XYZ and Roblox, like the ultimate goal is still that physical product, because at the end of the day, that's currently how brands make their money. So I still see the metaverse in inverted commas, whether it's gaming, whether it's social, whether it's mixed media, whether it's sort of brand microverse platforms. I still see that more as an engagement tool, but B, as just your new social media, your 2.3.4.0, whatever equivalent of Instagram or Twitter X, or whatever else what there is, like Facebook, which your brand probably still uses. So I don't really think that brands need to. It's not a question of creating more and more stuff for people's avatars. I think it's more the realization that those generations are spending a lot of time being social on these platforms. So therefore, you've got to meet them where they are on these platforms and make sure that you communicate with them on those platforms.
I agree. I think that certainly now and in the next several years, and let's call it the near term, I certainly agree with you that these next generation platforms, as one might describe, even though Roblox has been around for 17 years, but it's still considered a next generation
Yeah.
platform. I agree with you, as brands should look at them mostly as a new type of marketing channel and a way to connect with audiences, certainly. You've mentioned Facebook. I don't know of anyone below age 25 that even has a Facebook username. I mean, I'm not using Facebook almost at all. Certainly not that generation. So yes, in a way, Roblox, Fortnite, Zepeto, whatever
Yeah.
the platforms are, they are all a new kind of marketing channel for brands to connect with those audiences, and that is certainly the case. But I think there's something I think there's something deeper happening, Stephanie, which is really, really hard to think about at the moment because, with all respect and as much as we are amazed by what is possibly currently with 3D game engines and the fidelity of art and graphics and the way your avatar looks like, I think we're going to look back in 5, 10 years, maybe more, and we'll look back and say, oh my God, like it's like you and I are looking today on what existed in the 80s and the 90s. It's like,
Yeah,
oh my
like when
God,
the
this is
internet started, for example. Yeah,
exactly like
absolutely agree.
super pixelated characters and art. And it's like the web was terrible. And look where we are now. So and so let's play it out. And I think when we move into that domain where there is almost indistinguishable ability to distinguish between our virtual look and feel and our physical identity, I can't help but thinking that there's going to be a generation of internet users who are going to not only create their virtual avatar and hey, it looks cool and so on and so forth, but I do think there's a really good chance. Look, I might be wrong, and I'm not saying if it's good or bad. I'm just saying
Yeah, exactly.
technology is an enablement ultimately of human endeavor, ingenuity, creativity, expression. And I certainly see a world where, maybe even my 3-year-old baby girl, by the time she's 17, 18, 20, a young woman, I think there is a really good chance that the technology and the face expression, the emotional expression, the physical aptitudes of our identity online will get to such an advanced place that I could see people purchasing a new type of lipstick that is actually purely virtual and it's only for their virtual avatar. And they actually put a lipstick on every single day and they change their outfits and they buy a new purely virtual Levi's jeans. I actually see that happening. And here is what gives me the audacity to
I mean, do you
think
know
that
what?
that could
Up to a point, people, I mean, whether it's Roblox, whether it's Bitmojis that DressX are now doing and Snapchat and et cetera, et cetera. I think people do that now up to a point. I mean, so far, makeup hasn't been so great because it's a little bit more complex. But, they,
technically speaking, it's more
yeah,
complex at the moment, for
yeah,
sure. And I think this is what I'm saying. I think once the technology is there, I mean, let's look at the data. Again, let's use Roblox, for example. One of the data points Roblox is showcasing, which is, really, really interesting, is that about 20% of the platform users are changing their avatar outfit every day.
yeah. And
50%
then and
change.
then and then and there's also a lot of data on like hair look.
Yes.
Did you see that as well? Because
Hair,
again, it's like a bit more easy to do than
correct.
makeup at the
Correct.
moment. But hair is massive on Roblox.
Obsession. It's an
Yeah.
obsession. I mean, we've seen it so many times. Even when we launched NARS Color Quest, we
Mhm.
had a whole virtual goods collection in the first experience, the Super Social launch with NARS. And and this is a beauty brand, right?
Yeah.
Guess what was the number one most popular virtual item we created for avatars? It was a pink hair. The community went nuts over pink hair. And yes, now let's double click here for a second. Why? Because it's
Also, wasn't it on your Gucci as well that one of the hair looks
yes,
was really, yeah, it was. That was,
It's
I know
almost like
that was you
in
saying. Yeah.
every branded experience and collection we're
Yeah.
launching, hair is always the most popular. And here is, I think, one of the reasons why, Stephanie. It's because
Mhm.
of all the things that at the moment are technically possible from your face design, let's say, or appearance on Roblox, hair is the one where there's more flexibility because
Exactly.
Roblox figured out how to
Exactly.
enable the creation of hair. It's not
Agreed.
possible with makeup, with hair, with lipstick.
Yeah.
It's not, but it's going to get there. They're going to figure it out. They're going to figure it out. Epic Games is going to figure it out. Snap is going to figure it out. Zepeto is going. They're all going to figure out the technology of enable, and then put on top of that the facial expressions, showing emotions, right? Making sure that the camera can identify your face expression and in real time make you look and behave really as you just virtually. I'm pretty bullish and deterministic that it's going to happen. Now the question is, will that open up an opportunity for new brands and existing brands to actually create not only completely virtual native products that they can actually sell virtually, but will it also modify, guide, and drive real world purchases of product that are actually incepted virtually.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, and this is, talking about, those Roblox stats. There's another, there's another one at the moment that says that X amount of Gen Z, whatever, are their real life purchases are influenced by, what their avatar might look like, etc. And we might be a bit like, okay, all right, but actually, it's a thing. It is a thing. And the thing, and also, I mean, if you look at it in trends that we actually that are actually sort of a bit more understandable. I mean, if you sort of look at, Japanese anime trends and all that sort of thing, that has really gone into that has really gone into fashion as well. So I think, this is just this could be just an extension of that we've already seen, being born out in fashion trends. So yeah. I mean what you said about the facial expressions is interesting too, because that's what we're already doing with emojis, right? And now that is it Instagram who've just released like about a trillion. Oh no, it's the new update for the iPhone with the AI that have
Yeah,
just released literally a
yeah.
trillion or more different emojis.
Configuration. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's happening.
100%. 100%. I want to switch gears and talk a bit about even opening the discussion even more broadly to encompass not only virtual worlds, but everything else that has been happening over the last few years and through the panel and the events that you and your partner have been launching, and just the many, many conversations you've had with decision makers in beauty companies. What are the two or three things that at the moment you believe beauty executives and decision makers care about the most with all the changes and the flex that is happening and how technology is really impacting their category and their industry?
One of the things that everyone is talking about and everyone's sort of looking for that holy grail is hyper personalization. And I mean, that sort of is quite a nice follow on from what we've just been talking about from a sort of digital online metaverse type point of view. I mean, hyper personalization is, I mean, you can go into a store and you can sort of buy pretty much anything you want. But for a brand to be really, really able to target what somebody wants individually, because I think we're moving into an age where the cult of the individual is getting increasingly important. And I think it's probably come from social media, because we have access to everything right now. We can see sort of anyone, no matter where they are in the world, can see pretty much everything. And especially, upcoming generations, etc. And, everyone up to a point is getting increasingly done with the sort of homogenous nature of everything. And everyone, wants something for them. They want something different. They don't want to be, you know, on their Instagram in exactly the same high street look as everyone else has. So, like on the fashion side, that's where bespoke and customization comes in. It's also quite an important element of community commerce as well. But if we when we bring it into the beauty realm, one of the things that I'm most interested in is fragrance, and how a lot of companies, whether they're working with artificial intelligence to actually work out which emotions can be targeted by scents, and on the one hand, which emotions can be targeted by scents, and on the other hand, which scents lend themselves to create certain emotions. And a lot of companies have done it to a greater or lesser extent. But I mean, one thing I'm particularly interested in is something that L'Oreal, I think it's YSL, are doing. Coty's doing it to a certain extent as well with their Infiniment Coty fragrance in the pop-up in Paris. But YSL's is more, it's gone a bit further. They did a big, really interesting trial in I think in Dubai with this tech. So basically, it's partly to help the consumer, and then it's also partly to help the beauty advisors in the store. So basically, the consumer wears this headset that tracks their brain waves and sort of what sort of different little sensors in their heads are doing. And then they're given sort of certain scents or certain sort of like groups of scents that they smell. And when this and you see like their brainwave patterns coming up, and it can show what scents target different areas of the brain which are associated with different emotions. I mean, I think I've more or less got this right. But the idea is that, I mean, a lot of people say, okay, lavender is really calming. It reminds me of my my mum, my childhood, etc. But it doesn't, but that's, quite general. That's like, a pair of flared jeans. Whereas this can actually, the object of this is actually to say what emotions a particular scent targets in a particular person. And I mean, someone might have very, very bad associations with lavender, for example. So that then helps. Say the customer says, this is how I want something to make me feel. Then this is why I'm going back to the fact it's actually a tool for the sales assistants as well. Because once they know how the customer wants to feel, and then once they also know what scents are gonna engender those feelings in the customers, they can then sell and upsell and whatever accordingly. So, you see why using something like this is very interesting to a brand. It plays to the personalization, but, also at the end of the day for beauty, and beauty is very much about the bottom line. That's why, it's interesting. It is because it's something that helps with sales. I mean, I think from the Dubai trial, I think quite a high percentage of people doing it actually purchased at least one, maybe two out of the fragrances that were actually, put to them as a result of this headset thing. So yeah, so that's a really
That's
interesting
fascinating.
example
I
as
haven't
well.
heard about I haven't heard about this example, but it actually brings to mind, who do you think are some of the most innovative beauty companies that are really pushing the boundaries at the moment in terms of the use of next generation tech, if it's virtual worlds, AI, blockchain? I'm sure many of them are pitching you to write about it in your contributing pieces, some of which I'm sure our audience have read. But I'm curious, because of all of this exposure you have, who do you think are the one that are really, may not get it perfect, but are experimenting or putting themselves out there? They're not afraid of trying out and investing in these experimentation in the name of reaching, hyper personalization opportunities for their consumers, with the idea of course, selling more product. But I'm just curious, who are the ones that are pushing the boundaries the most at the moment?
Looking at, you can look at the sort of really big groups with a lot of money. I mean, groups like, on the beauty front, you've got your L'Oreal's. On the fashion front, you've got LVMH. So obviously they have got the money in their development departments to have, open innovation departments which can purely work on exploring, investigating, etc., etc. I mean, all brands are looking at this, etc. And I mean, I think what the consumer is now seeing is only really scratching the surface. I mean, for example, what Shiseido Group and NARS are doing is also really interesting. And, NARS especially is a brand that's really embraced and been willing to explore emerging technologies, right from, NFTs through to gaming, etc. I know you worked on a couple of their Roblox games. I thought their most recent microverse that they actually did on their own site was really interesting. And I think the thing that I thought was smartest about it was because it was integrated on their site, how it could really, really seamlessly go between. Because I mean, it's an experience that's kind of a game because got quite a few gaming elements. But it was how within that game you had a seamless opportunity to move through to purchase and virtual trial and then back to the game just with like a pop-up box window happening integrating with the site, as opposed to in other situations where you'd actually have to leave the game, go to the virtual comments, etc. It also gave people an opportunity to actually try it was for their explicit lipsticks, by the way. And it also gave people an opportunity to use the e-commerce AR virtual try-on of the different shades, which this comes back to what you were saying earlier about sort of ultimately people will be able to sort of try all these different shades on their avatar. But I mean, I think this is kind of an example of the fact that IRL in real life is actually still important because I think both digital and physical are really important. And this is why, this is one of the reasons why I really like that experience. Because, you're in the digital game, then you can try these shades on your actual face in the pop-up on the website. You can buy one of the colors there if you want. You can go back to the game. So
I
it was
agree.
just a really good 360 iteration of a campaign.
I agree. And I think NAR certainly has been the first beauty brand to launch any experience on Roblox. I think it was the first beauty brand to also experiment in gaming. They launched something in Animal Crossing,
Yeah,
early
yeah,
stages COVID.
yeah.
They've done this really unique
Mhm.
experience. I agree. I think what really captured my attention about what they've done on their own website was the idea that ultimately, when we think about the future of the internet, when we think about virtual worlds in 3D, when we think about Gen AI, when we think about what is the future website, essentially.
Yeah,
I think it's something that needs to really be a hub that connects all those pieces
yeah,
together,
absolutely.
because I don't think the future of the internet is one where, at least not the one I would want to see. I don't think it's one where you have a regular 2D website and when you want to do a 3D thing, you go to Roblox or Fortnite or whatever. I think ultimately the internet needs to be a 3D internet that is open, where users can really own and control the assets that they purchase, right? When you buy a Levi's jeans in a Levi's store, and you take it with you from the store and you put it in your closet, you own it.
Yeah,
If you move a house tomorrow, you will move the jeans with you, right?
yeah,
Levi's didn't sell you jeans just because you live in a certain address. So in the physical world, we have complete interoperability.
yeah. It's
The,
interoperability. That's been the key word for so long. It works up to a point, but where it becomes much more difficult is between, say, different gaming worlds. I mean, to a certain extent now, it can work between social Instagram platforms, etc., and gaming because there can be certain add-ons, etc., and that sort of thing. But with different gaming platforms that are sort of essentially in competition with each other, interoperability is proving a challenge. I mean, there are lots of ways around that challenge, but maybe you can just cut out the middleman by a brand having its own microverse, whatever 3D mixed reality platform that it hosts on its own territory, on its own terms. And then the assets there can be, moved, whether they're moved into real life, whether they're moved into, other more sort of traditional social channels, whatever.
I will say as much as there is no metaverse without interoperability. It's just going to be delusional to think there could be anything like a metaverse. The internet is by definition, naturally, is an interoperable infrastructure. That's why it's so big. That's why it's so good. These are the protocols that won. There are other versions of what a network connectivity could look like in, in a digital form, but the internet protocols are the one that became the most proliferated. Obviously, to a large degree thanks to the fact that Team Berners-Lee published those protocols for free and convinced CERN organization to let them be published for free. But the internet, by definition, is interoperable. So unless we evolve that internet to an immersive, open format without interoperability, we will have all of those siloed islands where I go to Fortnite, I go to Roblox, I go to Decentraland, or I go.
Yeah.
Decentraland is actually open
Yeah.
and built on blockchain. But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
fundamentally, it all needs to be connected. Just like you've mentioned today in social media, I can log into Instagram, I click on a link, it takes me to to an e-commerce shop on
Mhm.
Shopify.
Yeah, exactly.
That connectivity and interoperability. Without that, there's no metaverse.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, right now, I think everything is very fragmented. So it's kind of whether we'll have the sort of interoperability that you're talking about, or whether they'll kind of be one winner. So it's very much, I think we're very much gonna have to see what happens. But also as technology evolves, maybe this whole conversation that we're having is going to become redundant. Maybe something will happen.
100%. Well, I hope the future will not be one dominated by one platform, just like, although you could say the internet is open, but still there is a few platforms who basically
Yeah.
dominate the internet. So even if we do have an open, interoperable 3D internet, it doesn't mean there's not going to be one main winner. I think just because of network effects, typically that's what happens. I mean, this is to a large extent why Roblox is so big, right? The flywheel, the network effect is just so significant now within Roblox that even if you open up Roblox to other platforms, Roblox may likely still be a gigantic platform. Why would anyone want to not come back to the Roblox platform? But I think for all of the other things that we're talking about, the commerce opportunities, the ability to own your assets, for all of those other things, the internet will be a better place if it's more open, more immersive, user controlled, and of course ethically governed, which I think is probably
Mhm.
the biggest challenge at the moment, where it's a wild west. It's always been a wild west, and governments are typically run, at least in the U.S., by people who don't really understand these fundamental technologies and how they're impacting humanity, society. I mean, even now, 20 years since almost 20 years since Facebook was published, I still don't think the American government, the U.S. Congress, fully understands how these platforms work or the risk they pose to society, children, et cetera, et cetera. So we're just going to have to wait and see. There's so many components up in the air that needs to be addressed at the same time. But I love how we went from expression and avatars to beauty, and now we're talking about some things that are really at a much higher level of importance and gravity.
No, listen, it's true because I mean, we started. I really like the proposal that we started off with that you sent to me. You were sort of very much like, in a world where 3D avatars are roaming the web and lines are blurred. What is real and what is unreal, and what it means for the industry. Because and it was what was really funny. We sort of came at that proposition with different ideas, because one of the initial things that I thought when I was thinking about it, I was sort of thinking blurred lines, and I was thinking, well, it really, whether something's real or whether something's unreal really kind of depends on what your definition of reality is, right? And that also is very much dependent on context. What is real, what is fake, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I mean, you can take cosmetic surgery and fillers and Botox and whatever, and then you can say, well, actually, isn't that just an extension of using an Instagram filter? And then you can look at AI and change whether you can change your body shape, your face shape, etc., and say, well, isn't that just an extension of what an Instagram filter is, for example? So I think our perceptions of what is real, what is unreal, what is normal, what is not, are constantly shifting and evolving as the technologies that we have access to evolve. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I do. And that's a great point to wrap up. Stephanie, this has been so fun. Glad we had the chance to chat more live. And thanks for coming to the show. And we'll put a bunch of different links to the work you've done as we publish the podcast. And I'm sure folks are going to enjoy it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Into the Metaverse. We hope you learned a lot and explored new aspects of the metaverse.